Dr. Rakit. Good morning, Eileen Braun from the ASF. This is Paula Evans from the Foundation for Angelman Syndrome Therapeutics. Dr. Rakit, we would like to thank you again for taking the time to address the community and any questions they have regarding the upcoming OV101 clinical trial.
Great. Thanks for inviting me again, and great to see you both. So we're very excited at Ovid. We are moving forward with the STARS clinical trial. Things are progressing very well. We are actually in the middle of initiation of the study. So that means a couple different things. We've identified multiple sites across the US. As you know, this is going to be a US-only study to start. At least for this first trial, and then we would hopefully expand into other parts of the world once we have other trials ongoing. But we are in site startup mode. We have identified 9 confirmed sites spread across the US geographically. I'll just mention that for those of you who are curious, Mass General in Boston, Boston Children's Hospital in Boston, Cincinnati Children's, UCSD San Diego. There is Seattle Children's Hospital in Washington, Phoenix Children's in Arizona, the Dr. Skinner's site in Greenwood, South Carolina, University of Florida in Gainesville, Tampa, as well as I mentioned Cincinnati. So those are the ones, and then we're still actively looking at a couple other sites that hopefully will come on board fairly soon. We have our investigator meeting, which is starting this week, at the end of this week, where we will bring together all our principal investigators from these sites, as well as their supporting staff, to really understand the trial and really kick off what is our initiation. What we'll then wait for is IRB approvals at each of these local sites. So we already have a central IRB approval, which is great, but many of our institutions require a local IRB approval. This is their institution review board that oversees conduct of clinical trials in the local site. And we hope to have those really approved by the middle of October or so that we can then start enrolling participants into the trial. And hopefully that will happen towards the beginning of November, most likely it may be a few weeks, plus minus.
Awesome, that's excellent. We had some questions from the community after the last webinar, and we're just going to go through those one at a time, if that's okay for you, Dr. Rickett.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to turn it over to Eileen Braun.
Thank you very much, Paula, and thank you, Dr. Rakit, for again being with us this morning. We'll go ahead and start with the very first question. It is a 2-part question. So how long will the trials last? And more specifically, when are the results expected to be published?
So in terms of the STARS clinical trial, it's difficult to say exactly how long it will last. As we're starting, hopefully, recruitment into the trial as of November, we've estimated about 1 year for the study to progress. And that gives us time to recruit participants into the trial and then follow them and so that they are involved in the trial for the specified time. An individual who will be enrolled in the trial will actually be in the trial for 3 months. So we really are looking forward to working with the community, with the Angelman Syndrome community, patients, families, and healthcare providers to really help us with this trial. We'll be looking to you as well as FAST and ASF to help us really understand if there are any barriers to enrollment, but also to help identify potential participants into the trial. As for the results and when those will be available, but again, it really depends on when we complete enrollment into this study. We're actually looking for 75 participants total to be involved. And after that has been completed, we'll have the results very shortly afterwards. Again, we're aiming for end of next year to have our trial completed and then have subsequent results.
Excellent. The next question from the community is, will ASF subtypes, I assume that means genotypes, be differentiated and or somehow taken into consideration with the study measurements or in the patients selected for the trial?
Yeah, so to enroll in the trial, a participant has to have a molecularly confirmed diagnosis of Angelman syndrome. It doesn't matter what subtype or change there is. So it could be deletion, it could be a mutation, uniparental disomy. All participants, all patients who have any of those variations will be eligible for the clinical program. What we'll do is actually look at the variations on the back end of the study. So instead of specifically specifying who can be enrolled up front, we'll look at the variations, whether it's deletion, whether it's mutation, whether it's uniparental disomy, using statistical methods when the trial is complete.
I just want to add, you're not excluding ICD, correct? Imprinting center disorder genotype? That would be included.
So no, we're not excluding ICD.
So, and can I ask a clarifying question? If a individual has a clinical diagnosis, can they be considered and would they be tested, or are they not considered in this first phase?
So if there's no molecular diagnosis that's been confirmed, we'll actually do this test for you. So if there's a clinical diagnosis and there's no documentation of the confirmation, then we will have a genetic analysis performed for you at our expense.
Okay, terrific. The next question, I believe you just answered this, is what is the sample size or the number of patients for the study? And then, excuse me, as a follow-up, what percentage of the study participants will be given the placebo?
Great. So like I said previously, it's 75 participants in the study, and we are looking to. This is a 3-arm study. So, and it's a randomized, double-blinded study, which means neither myself nor the healthcare provider, the investigator, or you will know which arm that you're actually in. However, there's 3 arms. 2 of them are active arms. They have variable doses of the OV1 compound, and one of the arms is placebo, which means sugar pill. So of the 75, approximately a third will be on placebo, 2/3 will be on active compound.
Okay. Please give examples of how the team expects to measure improvement with behavior, memory, and cognition, if you are allowed to share that at this time.
No, that's great. So that's a great question. So what we're looking at is multiple manifestations of Angelman syndrome and how we can potentially affect those symptoms. So what we're looking to do is measure through validated scales that have been used in other clinical programs, as well as some new ones that we've come up with working with the healthcare community that may be important for families and people who have Angelman syndrome. So we're looking at, for example, motor function, how people walk, their gait, looking at two interesting ways of looking at this. One is through a scale that we will actually, that's been validated and has been used in other studies, looking at gait and asking questions about gait. But a corollary measure with that is a walkway that can actually measure through computer and digital technology how a person actually walks across this walkway and can give a sense of their balance, their gait, how wide the gate is, how narrow, and then what we'll do is be able to look at that from a baseline perspective and then again at the end of the study. Similarly, we're looking at behavior, we're looking at symptoms of anxiety, again at the baseline visit as well as at the end. We'll be looking at seizures and if there's any change in seizure frequency. or duration, and how OV101 may potentially affect EEG readings as well as seizure activity. And then in terms of just overall wellness and well-being, we're looking at various scales around quality of life and measures that have been used in other trials as well, looking at variations on how the healthcare provider may think things are progressing and how a caregiver may believe things are progressing. And I'll take an example. Those are just some examples of what we're doing with this study. Again, as many of you know, and I've seen some of the questions up front, that this compound was initially looking at sleep in an insomnia population. Of course, we'll be looking at sleep as well in this study, but that's not the only thing we're looking at. We're very much interested in some of the other aspects of Angelman syndrome.
Okay, very good. That actually leads us into the next question, which is about sleep. And for the sleep monitoring part of the trial, will the investigators determine a sleep baseline prior to the trial beginning?
Yes, so we're looking at sleep using two different measures. One of them is a questionnaire, which many of you have been, if you've participated in some of these trials before, know about sleep diaries, but if you don't, it will definitely explain to you what those are. Basically a questionnaire about your sleep habits that will be taken at baseline 6 weeks and at the end of the study, which is 12 weeks. But we're also using a wearable device. It's called actigraphy device. It's provided by Philips, and that can be worn on the wrist or ankle. That will also monitor how a person is sleeping and their sleep habits. And that will also be done at baseline 6 weeks and 12 weeks, even though you'll wear the device for the duration of the study. Those are the time points that we'll be looking at in particular. And another point that we're looking at is also how the primary caregiver, how their sleep may be affected. So we're asking participants to have their primary caregiver also participate in the sleep study so that they also are wearing a actigraphy device that can also monitor and assess how their sleep may have changed because the participants' sleep habits may change during the duration of the study.
That's fantastic. Dr. Rakib, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you a question that you're probably not prepared for, but I know it's going to come up within the community. When you discussed the placebo arm, you said it's a sugar pill. Has Ovid taken into consideration children that are on either ketogenic diet or the LGIT or the modified Atkins as far as the sugar content of the placebo pill? Yeah,
so you're talking about, so the Atkins is a diet, and I missed that first part, Paula, was that ketogenic diet?
Yeah, some of our children are on the ketogenic diet or LGIT or what we call the MAD, the modified Atkins. So I know sugar intake is a big concern amongst this community. A lot of the kids are on sugar-free. Is that taken into consideration when you design the placebo?
It is. So placebo is actually, I mean, I mentioned sugar pill as a kind of metaphorically, it really doesn't have a lot of sugar in it, but it's a basically inactive pill. So there's actually no active substance in the placebo. But as concerns the diets, definitely we'll take that as part of the medical history, knowing what particular diets that a participant may be on, but that's not an exclusion criteria. We'll just capture that information, whether you're on a ketogenic diet or Atkins diet or another special diet, and we'll, what we do ask is that during the duration of the study, there are no changes to your normal pattern. So as long as the diet isn't being changed throughout the course of the study, then being on a special diet is fine.
I know the word sugar is going to trigger some alarm bells in the community, so I just wanted to address that. But the actual question I should be asking you is, will participants' current sleep meds need to be discontinued during the trial?
So ideally, we wouldn't have any sleep medications in the study. However, we know that because there are chronic sleep disturbances with this population, we are allowing chronic sleep medications for certain. Somebody's phone's ringing. So the ones that are excluded are Ambien and the so-called Z-type sleep medications. So Ambien, or generic name is Zolpidem, Lunesta, which is esopicolone, and Sonata, which is Zoleflon. So those are excluded from the study. So if you're on any of those, you can't participate. And the reason being is that, again, this compound initially was studied in insomnia, so we don't want an additive effect. However, people who are on chronic sleep medications, they can remain on their low-dose sleep medications if they are other than those that I just mentioned. And as long as there's no change for the 4 weeks prior to being on the study, you have to be on stable dose and then no changes throughout the study. And then we'll be able to analyze that when we do our statistical analysis. The other compounds which are not allowed in the study are cannabidiols, Charlotte's Web, or any FDA unapproved supplements specifically for sleep. And those are the ones that are excluded from the study. Was that fairly clear?
Yes. And when I'm just gonna, because I know this is gonna be a follow-up question. If there's a patient who the caregiver would like to enroll them in the trial and they are on one of the compounds that you mentioned, can the child stop that for a certain period of time to qualify for the OV101 trial?
Yes. So first of all, participants should speak to the healthcare provider before making any changes in this medication, because that is a decision between yourself and the primary health physician. As long as the change has been made 4 weeks prior to enrollment and you've been stable for 4 weeks, then and you are no longer on those medications that are excluded, then you'd be eligible to participate in the trial, knowing that there's other inclusion and exclusion criteria that would have to also be met. But that is one of the ones around sleep, is that you'd have to be stable on medications or chronic medications for a period of 4 weeks at least before enrollment into the trial.
Okay, very good. Next question, has OV101 been tried before with people with other genetic disorders that are similar to Angelman syndrome?
So that's a great question. OV101 has not been studied in specific genetic disorders. What we've done is look at other clinical trials, such as trials in Down syndrome, Fragile X, in Rett, and taken the learnings from those trials and incorporated them into our STARS clinical trial program. OV101 has, however, been studied in over 3,000 adult patients who had primary insomnia, and overall the benefit-risk profile was favorable.
Do you believe that OV101 will make people sleepy?
So because it was initially developed for primary insomnia, there is a chance that the participant may become sleepy. However, there are some different dosing involved in this trial, so you may not recognize it. It may not be enough of a dose that causes a participant to be sleepy, but we are just hypervigilant just to record those events, but there is the potential.
And with the previous OV101 trials, did those trials include patients with seizure disorders?
The insomnia program did not specifically look at patients with seizure disorder. However, the previous sponsor of the program, Lundbeck, did do an individual investigator trial that looked at patients with epilepsy, but no significant findings were found during that study.
Since the trial will be for adults, will the parent be required to have legal guardianship over the patient?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in order to participate in the trial, a legally authorized representative needs to be able to listen to, understand the trial, and sign the informed consent. Those laws vary from state to state, so it's best to discuss with your healthcare provider about the specific rules in your state, and then decide with them, after you understand the trial, whether this trial is right for you.
So as a follow-up to that, then, is it the laws of the state where the trial is being held, or is it the laws where the individual resides?
It's dependent on the laws where the trial is being held. So the laws are governed by where the site is located.
Okay, thank you. So what is the length of time the phase 2 trial will last?
Yeah. I'm going to just kind of go back on that last question about the legally authorized representative. Definitely, it depends on where the site is located, and those laws are important. However, if somebody is coming from a different state that has different regulations, they may just want to check on that. I'm not quite sure, but that was something we'd have to follow up on. I would say that most states in the US do require a legally authorized representative to sign on behalf in order to participate in the clinical trial program.
Okay, thank you.
Clarification for that. For how long the phase 2 trial is, it really depends on how our enrollment goes. I think that's why we are really enthusiastic and excited to work with the community, because the sooner we can enroll our patients into the clinical trial program, the sooner that we'll be able to have results and then think about next steps moving forward. So it really depends. Right now, we've allotted ourselves about a year for the study. And so we would anticipate results in the end of next year towards, let's say, November, December 2017. However, if we recruit more quickly, there's the potential that we could bring forward those timelines and we'd have results sooner.
If all goes well, will there be a phase 3, and how long would that take?
Yeah, so definitely we would be considering a further clinical trial program if this initial STARS trial goes well. We'd be looking at potentially other age groups, younger age groups. In terms of how long and when that may start, it's a little premature. It really depends on when this trial comes forward and has results, and that will really inform us about the phase 3 program and what we do with the phase 3 program when it does start.
Okay, and I know this is a big question within the community. We know we're starting with adults first, but can younger children get on a waiting list if there will be a trial coming up for younger participants?
So we don't have a waiting list at this time because we don't have a clinical trial that's ready for younger patients, younger participants yet. However, we are creating a database that if you're interested in additional information from us and just to be kept up to date, that we'll basically get to opt in for information from us, and we are in the process of pulling that together. So we're happy to include anybody who's interested in that communication. But we are definitely going to be working with both your organizations, VAS and ASF, and inform the community when we do have a trial or a clinical program for younger participants ready.
Okay.
Next question is, this medication is delivered via a capsule that's taken orally. Some or many individuals with Angelman syndrome have issues swallowing capsules. Will there be alternates to swallowing a capsule, like mixing the contents into something? So basically they're asking if they could open up a capsule, sprinkle the contents into maybe applesauce and
yeah. So the particular capsule that we're using, it can't be opened. You know, there are some capsules you can open and empty the contents. This particular capsule is unable to be opened. So, but you may give the capsule with or without food. So It's not a huge capsule. I would put it in with applesauce if that's going to make it easier, but it can also be given without food as well.
Eileen, I think I already asked your next question, so you want to skip on to 16.
I was just going to say I'm going to go ahead and skip that one. So let's talk about side effects. It was mentioned at the last webinar that there are some known side effects. In the previous sleep studies that were done, how common were these side effects?
So when we look at common side effects, those would be side effects that happen in more than, let's say, 2 per 100. So more than 2% of a population. So the common side effects that happen in, let's say, between 2 to 10% of the population. And remember, the OV101 program was studied in adult participants who had primary insomnia. And the most common adverse events there were dizziness, nausea, vomiting, sleepiness, and headache, and occurred about 2 to 10% of participants.
Okay, this next question is an interesting one. There's been some research in the SLP dysphagia medical literature on how thickening agents for liquids impact medication absorption within the body depending on where they need to be absorbed for maximal efficacy. Will researchers take that into consideration?
So that's an interesting question. I haven't really come across that body of work where thickening agents have been thought to impact absorption. So what we'll do is actually, for those people who are on thickening agents, we'll want to capture that with our medical history when we ask about what current medications or current diets people are on. And then we'll look at that more on when we do the analysis on the back end, when we're looking at the analyzing the data. But that's something that was new, and that was a great observation that we'll incorporate into obtaining that history when we move forward. Okay.
A lot of the questions, or a number of the questions that we've received, have really dealt with a comparison to the previous trials of OV101 and then the current population that we're looking at of people with Angelman syndrome. So this is another one of those questions. So did any of the previous trials with OV101 have people with as severe a condition as Angelman syndrome or just insomnia?
You know, the OV101 program initially was just in insomnia, and as I mentioned, there was a small investigator-run trial, which was in epilepsy, but there was really nothing performed in a population which had more severe illness, such as Angelman syndrome.
Okay, beyond improving sleep and insomnia, what other specific improvements are expected with OV101?
Yeah, so I mentioned a few of those earlier, what we're looking at, but I think it's important for everyone in the community to realize that this program isn't expected to be a cure. OV101 is not going to be a cure, and it's not going to be a miracle drug or treatment. We may or may not see distinctive improvement. And I think just to set expectations, we are very hopeful, but it may be that we don't really see much of a difference in change. However, this is a phase 2 study, and so primarily we're looking at safety, which we're very confident in the safety profile of OV101. What we've added into this phase 2 study, slightly more ambitious exploratory efficacy endpoints, and that's what we're hoping to find a trend or potentially some impact on symptoms which go beyond just sleep. And that's why we've really focused on the motor function, how somebody might be walking, how somebody might be using their hands or fingers, and if we could potentially see some sort of difference there. Seizure activity or behavior and anxiety. Those are all areas that we're very interested in. But again, we may not see a difference there because it may or may not work. Also, some of the people will be on placebo, so there'll be no active drug, and unlikely we'll see a difference there. So I would encourage everybody to remember that as as you participate, if you do participate in the trial, and when you're in the trial, to be really honest and truthful about your observations, because we are relying on observations through the questionnaires and diaries to be really accurate, and avoid the temptation to overemphasize certain activities that you may see but may not be there, because we want to be sure that we're actually accurately capturing the observations that you see, and to be truthful as possible to ourselves. So hopefully this will be a compound that can make a difference, but we don't know yet. So those are areas that we're looking at, and this is why this trial is so structured in this way, so that we can have the most credible evidence and scientific data possible that can really give us some direction and answer some of these questions.
Okay, very good. If everything goes as hoped, how long after the trials will adults with Angelman syndrome, so those that are not in the trial, how long will it be before they would be able to start the drug?
So that again depends on how quickly we enroll a trial. Once we have the results, it really depends on what we see. Hopefully we'll see an impact across multiple areas that are important in Angelman syndrome. And that really would then, like I said, such as motor, such as behavior, such as sleep, such as seizures. And we'll be looking at the totality of the data, and then have a conversation with the regulatory authorities, in this case the FDA in the US, to really see what next steps may be and what additional evidence may be required in order to move forward and ultimately have something available for people with Angelman syndrome chronically.
Okay, I'm going to throw another monkey wrench at you, Dr. Rakit. Does Ovid plan to run trials in Europe? If researchers outside the US are interested, who should they contact at Ovid? And here's, I'm going to add to this that you weren't prepared for, but can a patient travel from another country to participate in the trial here in the United States?
Yeah, so right now we don't have any plans to conduct the STARS clinical trial program in Europe. As we think about other trials that we may add to this program, that may be something in the future, but currently we are not opening sites in Europe or other countries outside of the US. If you'd like to be informed of what's going on at Ovid and our clinical trial programs, feel free to send me a note or send a note to our general information email box that you can find on our website, and that will add you to our database of people and who want to be contacted, and we can proactively reach out to you. If you're from another country and want to participate in the clinical trial, let's say, for example, you're close to a site and you live in Canada and want to come over, you can participate in a trial in the US. It somewhat depends on your local regulations as well, but there's no barrier to having people travel to a site, whether it's from a neighboring state or whether it's from another country. Of course, that has a lot of logistical needs from a family perspective, but that's something we're open to, and the best thing to do would be to discuss with your primary healthcare provider, who can give you more information about this trial, or reach out to one of the sites or us if they need more information about the program.
Okay, very good. So with the trial, it will run for 3 months, and then will it move to an additional group, like an additional age group? How will that work?
So right now we're not looking at moving to an additional age group. We can't go to younger patients, younger participants yet. And the reason is that we don't have information on pharmacokinetics, which means how OV101 behaves in the body in people who are less than 18 years of age. And once we do have that information, we'll be able to study OV101 in a younger population, but for right now we can't. And so right now the STARS trial is limited to adults And then if that changes in the future, we may modify the study or do another study that's focused on the younger age groups. That's still to be determined. We haven't made a decision there yet.
Okay, I think you covered some of this, Dr. Rakit, but if a potential study participant is on minocycline, CBD oil, or other such treatments, would that disqualify them, or would they have to discontinue them, the other treatments, prior to starting the OV101 trial? If so, how long would they need to be off of these treatments before starting the OV101 trial?
So I think we definitely covered the cannabidiol and other medications. Minocycline also is excluded from this trial. Before making any changes in your person with Angelman syndrome that you take care of, their medication regimen, talk to your primary healthcare provider, and then discuss whether this trial may be the right study for you. And if so, then they will be eligible if they're off of those medications for a period of 4 weeks. And that includes this other sleep medications like we discussed previously. But before making any changes, you need to discuss that with your healthcare provider.
Dr. Rakit, I did want to follow up with the very first bit of information that you presented with the different clinical sites, the different study sites. And we were having a discussion yesterday just about the difference between clinicians and principal investigators. And so because clinical trials are a bit new for this community, maybe you could just explain very briefly the difference between a principal investigator and the clinicians and the people who will be administering the medication and going through the clinical trials.
Sure, that's great. The clinical trials are being conducted in primarily larger hospital institutions or academic settings or academic sites that are well known in the healthcare system. When we do clinical trials, what we typically need is a team of individuals who come together for various aspects of the trial. And the primary person who's responsible for the appropriate conduct of a study or of a clinical trial at a particular site is the principal investigator. And the principal investigator can be a qualified individual who has run clinical trials or is running clinical trials under the guidance of the regulations of the local IRB and really understands how to conduct and manage a study. They may or may not be a clinician. They may, but they are typically scientifically qualified to have experience with, in this case, Angelman syndrome, and to work with the community and the team of individuals at that site. The clinician is basically, I think, the healthcare provider or your healthcare provider who would be administering either medical tests, physical examination, medical assessments, ordering laboratory tests, who is actually most likely a physician. A clinician can also be a nurse, but in this case, most of the people who will be administering and assessing from a physical examination needs to be a qualified MD. So there may be multiple people on that study team who you interact with at a clinical site, and they all work together in order to make sure that, first of all, that we meet the ethical requirements and safety requirements, and making sure that it's as comfortable and easy for you to participate in the study, but also to make sure the scientific credibility and rigor is maintained in the study, and also to be an advocate and make sure that the study is run ethically under the guidance of the local IRB, as well as oversight by us here at Ovid, to make sure that this trial is successful for not only us, but also for the entire community, so that we can really move this forward.
Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Rakit. Eileen and I will monitor the community for any follow-up questions, and then we'll make a decision if we should schedule another webinar, or maybe if Ovid will address those at the upcoming FAST Summit in the beginning of December. I want to thank you again very much for your time and your thorough explanation and answering of all these community questions and concerns.
Great. Thank you both again. I'll be definitely at the FAST Gala in December, and let me know. Be happy to do another webinar again to address any questions that the community may have, and I'll leave it to you both to coordinate again. And thank you again for having me on again today.
Thank you, Eileen.
Very good. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Dr. Rakit.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.